Thank you, Ryan, for the quick intro, and welcome everybody in today's session on essentially nailing your product case study. One of the reasons I was kind of prompted to create this is that when I myself was interviewing for different product management roles a few years ago, I didn't really have the help and guidance I needed to, build out these case studies when I got to that point in the interviews. And I thought it would be very beneficial for new PMs in the space, as well as ones, potentially in like the middle of their careers, to get a refresher. And I think this presentation and deck kind of gives you that foundation as to, what to build out and what to include in your different product case studies when going about your interviews. I know a few of you on the call, I think Mark and a few others are potentially looking for roles right now. And so this might be very beneficial for you and others on the call. So that being said, let's get started, right? So in terms of today's layout and format, we want to do a quick overview as to who I am. We'll go through essentially the 4 W's of the product case world and kind of what you need to understand about them. We'll then focus on how you should structure your case, what's kind of the right format and a good foundation that you can use for your future interviews or any ongoing ones. Then I'll actually show you some sample case overviews, ones that I myself have submitted to companies, and I'll be able to kind of analyze each of them and tell you what worked and what didn't work. And then at the end, we'll just, take it away and focus on areas where, some of the audience here can, focus on these steps, and you'll be able to hopefully nail your next product case interview. So that's the contents. Again, without having these sponsors, the conference like today wouldn't be possible. So I just want to say thank you to Pragmatic Institute, Texas McCombs, and the 280 Group for being our sponsors and providing essentially this medium for all of us to meet this Saturday and learn from one another. So thank you to our sponsors. And let's kind of start with who I am and kind of a little bit of a backstory. So right now, currently, I'm a senior product manager at Dun & Bradstreet. It's a data analytics firm, also in the finance space. And primarily, my role is in the sales and marketing division. I'm trying to help marketers and really salespeople drive more leads to their business and essentially convert those leads into revenue. And how I go about that is, I rely on the UX team, I rely on the engineering team, and they are able to help build solutions to the problems I identify. And so that's kind of my current main role here in the Austin, Texas region here in the US. Then, I also am a co-founder and mentor of Product Hired. So Product Hired, essentially it's a career resource platform to help product managers, designers, product owners, anyone kind of in the non-technical areas in tech to find careers, find mentors, and find events where they can meet like-minded folks. So by all means, if you are looking for a mentor, I think from our previous conversation with Joe, this is one of those places where you can go on producthired.com, look for a mentor and schedule something right now and see if you can learn a thing or two. And lastly, a few years ago, I was working at Adobe as a product manager. At Adobe, I was leading anything under the support.adobe.com domain. So that means any support requests that came in from all of their respective products, I was the one making sure that product ran smoothly, had a tight roadmap, and again, we were addressing a lot of the problems and pain points that a lot of the users within the Adobe universe had. So definitely a different breadth of experience from B2C to B2B, but also kind of launching my own product in the market as well and getting revenue from that. So different types of experiences are great as a PM. It kind of shows that you have a breadth of knowledge across many industries. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to shift in my more recent activities into B2B space. So it definitely helps. So moving on to our main agenda, let's talk about the different product case studies. So typically, what I've noticed and what many of you might start noticing as well is that there's a few flavors of these product case studies that you might be asked from your hiring manager. One might be a skills assessment. Another could just be a simple presentation or a deck. And then lastly, it could be a feature launch. And so with a skills assessment, right, typically a company might give you a problem or some type of prompt, and they kind of want 1 or 2 kind of answers to that prompt. Essentially something to, let's say, validate a hypothesis. How would the PM go about this scenario, right? And again, this is sometimes relevant to the actual job and the role. So the more industry knowledge you have in this space, it may be beneficial for you. But they're really wanting to understand the process. Secondly, the presentation itself. Sometimes you're going to actually need to present a deck and you're going to need to share it across some stakeholders in your interview. And what that means from the PM side is A, you need to be very clear and succinct in what you want to share, meaning you can't just kind of ramble along and, kind of confuse what everyone is trying to understand about your presentation. It needs to be clear, the agenda needs to be succinct, and also they need to understand your train of thinking, right? As a good PM, you need to be able to explain your thinking to not just designers, not just your manager, engineers, but other stakeholders, right? Sales and marketing teams, support teams, and other engineering teams across your organization. And they need to understand what you are trying to do and what you are trying to ask of them. So again, that's very key and something that they'll definitely test on in a lightweight manner. And lastly, a feature launch. So think of this as you're just about to launch a feature into the market. How are you going to do it successfully? And how is it going to lead to growth in a certain number of metrics? So for example, if you are growing a product or launching a product in the B2C space, let's say in the last mile area, right? How are you going to drive more folks buying and purchasing and asking for deliveries, right? What's in your go-to-market plan that's different or that will lead to that traction, right? So being able to articulate that will be very helpful. So moving on, when do you typically get a product case study? Well, normally they're not going to just give it to you right away. It's going to be usually after you apply for the job and after you have 1 or 2 rounds with the company and your hiring manager, they want to just test your ability at that point. And normally it should take roughly 5 to 10 hours. Sometimes they may give you a time, but normally you should spend no more than 10 hours on a particular assessment. The reason I say that is you might be interviewing for multiple companies. It might make sense to spread out your effort across these different product case studies. And also you might be working a day job, you might have other hobbies. It might just be difficult to fit that time in. So just be cognizant of that. And don't underestimate the amount of effort some of these case studies may take. And you're going to see very soon some examples as to how long some of them can take and the type of research you may need to do. And kind of going back to the why, which I kind of slightly explained a few minutes ago, but they're definitely going to want to test your communication skills, right? A good PM, again, knows how to articulate things, make sure lets the team know what they are focusing on and what they're wanting to do, and kind of provides clarity where, let's say, there could be confusion before. They're going to want to test your product management rigor. And what this means is, as a good PM already, someone that's, let's say, a little bit more established, they want to know that, hey, you've already done this once or twice. You've been through a full end-to-end life cycle of launching a product. They can trust you and you know the basics, right, and the foundations. So they don't necessarily need to test you on that per se, but they want to test you and drill into specific areas that you might have knowledge in and you might not, but that's something for them to vet. So again, very important to test. And then lastly, it's all about understanding how you can collaborate with your team, right? I think from Joe's conversation earlier, just one before mine, Joe was mentioning how it's important to build trust in your team. And so one of the most important things when, let's say, you may be presenting in your final on-site interview, let's say you're presenting a deck about your go-to-market strategy, it's important to kind of get some buy-in from the audience, right? Before the presentation, of course, if let's say you were working at the company, you'd want to work with a circle of different stakeholders, right? You want designs expertise, you want sales expertise before you kind of share this readout or you share this deck with everyone to make sure they're all on the same page. So, how do you build that trust and that engagement with them? You foster healthy relationships little by little over time when you are on the roll. And so in an interview, it might make sense to, make sure these stakeholders would be included in that conversation. And that way it shows that, hey, you're open to working with others and you're not going to be in a siloed type of work environment, which the PM isn't in a silo. They work across different orgs and different streams. So that becomes very important. So let's focus on the structure, right? So in terms of building out your case study, I found that these 9 different areas really help with creating that right structure. So let me kind of go through these quickly, and then I'll kind of share some examples for each of these points. But in a nutshell, it's great to go over the problem, great to show the goals, the use cases, different assumptions, your user flows, features, your go-to-market, your key metrics and or success, and the risks. So having these 9, you don't need them necessarily all the time, but it would be beneficial if they haven't given you a template to follow something like this. So that way it's very clear and you kind of focus in all aspects of your product when building out this case. So problem, self-explanatory. It's really what are you trying to solve here from the user and the customer's pain point? What's that real main problem that you want to solve? And then your goals are how are you going to potentially get to that goal, like get to that goal of solving the problem for them. Use cases could be specific behaviors that you've noticed in your customers and something that they could be asking for. In the B2B space, it could be, hey, I was on a customer call and they found this problem and this problem, within our product. And, they normally do this type of behavior on a day-to-day basis, but our product doesn't support it. So that could be a use case, right? It could also be a user story. And user stories, again, that kind of speaks to the foundations of product management, right? A user story typically has the who, the what, and why, or the benefit that the user needs to do this sort of action to get some sort of benefit. So kind of play with use cases or user stories in these product cases that you build out. Then there's assumptions, right? List your assumptions that you have. Show some user flows. And again, this is going to be helpful when you are working with UX. If you have UX on your team, which most likely PMs do, it shows that, hey, you can create a workflow, explain kind of your train of thought in addressing the problem, but not necessarily building out mocks per se, or even visual designs. That's something that your UX team can help you with. They could also help you with the user flows as well, but depending on your organization, you might need to do some of that work as a PM, or if it's a large org, they have certain functions already to help you in that area. Then there's features and the user stories, which we kind of discussed. And then your go-to-market, right? How does that look like for B2C, B2B, whatever product that they've given you. And then key metrics and success. So this one here, I think is really important and something that a lot of organizations don't necessarily track or measure too well. And what I mean by that is sometimes PMs are always delivering new features, new products, and they are not so much held accountable to the metrics or the success of it to drive the business forward. I think sometimes companies, they just want you to execute, and if there is no traction, depending on again how big the company size is, they might not care. But a good PM can show impact in their role. And so what you want to do is any new case study even that you're building out, or even new product that you are managing, is very important to show, well, I'm building this out and this is how I'm going to track my product in the market and measure its success, right? I want to track these set of metrics and I'm going to hit these set of metrics by a certain time point. And why? Because I'm trying to hit my revenue goals in Q1 of 2022. So if I can do that, to me, that is success. And that is something that I can then share with my manager, my company, and also put on my resume, which means I've shown impact here on this role, right? A lot of recruiters and hiring managers don't necessarily care about you being able to do the regular PM responsibilities. What they care is you can do the responsibilities, great, but with these responsibilities, I actually shifted revenue in my organization by 20x. That's kind of what they want to hear, and that's kind of the stories you would actually tell them during the interview. So that becomes very important. And then lastly, risks. So how to mitigate them. Sometimes you might be given prompts. So prompts are like, they'll give you a question or two and they kind of give you some context and you need to answer some few questions. And a good example of a prompt is this one right here. So this was a sample case study that was given to me by a roadside assistance company. I think they were called Jiro and Swoop. And so they kind of explained the prompt here in this section. And then they asked for a deliverable, meaning, hey, I want an overview about this particular feature. I want a user flow. I want some user story for the development of the mobile web payments functionality, and then explain your rollout plan. So this could be a sample prompt that you could be given. It doesn't look too complicated, but key thing here to note is if you have questions about it, ask earlier before you start the work. I've made a few mistakes where I haven't really asked the questions. And then when I was doing the presentation, I actually misunderstood the exercise completely and went a different direction. So it's important to ask early. It doesn't hurt your odds. It just makes them better. This is another sample prompt. This was for a healthcare startup. They were trying to kind of figure out, what payment plan would work best. And they wanted the PM to figure out in some sort of exercise what would be better. So this is another example. And then this one here was a take-home assignment by Braves. Braves is, I think, a marketing content syndication company. So they kind of gave me a 2-pager about the industry and what problem they're trying to target. And then these were the questions that they wanted the PM to answer. So again, imagining the problem and the opportunity, they were asking like, what type of questions would you ask head of product? What would you include in your discovery project plan? What data do you want to collect? That kind of thing. How would you identify a particular product to build? So they wanted to see how you think, right? At least in these set of questions. So kind of moving on, let's look at a few case studies. In 3 to be exact, and one that let's say is on average not good. It won't basically move you forward. And the reason I say that is because I submitted this case, and unfortunately they didn't move me forward in the interview process. And it was for, I think, a financial bank company. The second one is that roadside assistance company, and I did a much better job with their particular product case. So you're going to kind of see some improvements in this version. And then lastly, you'll see a good example of a spec as well as a presentation deck. And again, this one also moved me forward in the interview process. So let's take a look at the first one. And again, it's a product spec for how a PM would build a new revenue stream within WhatsApp, right? They typically, a company likes to kind of sometimes give you questions specific to the role, or in this case, something completely, in the maybe consumer space. They want to know how you think. So for this particular spec, I kind of laid out, and I'm going to kind of run through these pretty quickly because I want to kind of share more of the feedback and what I learned from this process. So here were all my contents, which again is fairly similar to what I've identified, the foundational work, right? You have your mission, goals, persona, why we're trying to build this out, rollout, success. So it's all, kind of tied in there. And these were kind of some of my slides. You have mission, you have kind of the competitive space, your business goals, right? You have your needs of a particular user that I was targeting, the persona, right? Kind of going deeper. Sometimes the PM and UX or your UX team should work together on the persona, but it's really important for you to just understand the customer and their pain points. So it's always good to kind of include a slide on that. I shared my business concepts, more about the business concepts, and you'll notice in this slide here in particular, how I organized my, let's say, ranking and prioritization was based on the RICE framework. And we'll talk about that and kind of analyzing if this was a good idea or not for me. Then I kind of ranked the concepts, and then I figured out, okay, I'm going to focus on this area, and these are the reasons. I kind of shared the user flow, so I built very simple UX as to how I would approach, building a business marketplace within WhatsApp. So I did some user flows, right? And then how I would do my go-to-market, right? And then outline my criteria of success for this product. And then that's pretty much the end of the deck. And in terms of the feedback, right, I had to share this deck in a 35-minute call on site with about 6 different team members. And the key thing that I got back was I should have focused on one area to be specific and not kind of explain my discovery process. The prompt itself actually just wanted one area. And so I misread the question. That was kind of a ding on my part. Second, the deck itself and how I was explaining the concept was not clear. They kind of got lost from the very beginning, what direction I wanted to lead and take the audience into. So that wasn't good. And another thing that also is sometimes it can be a red flag depending on where you are in your career, but using prioritization frameworks like RICE could signal that you are still early in your career as a PM. So you have to be careful what frameworks you want to use. Even myself, when I've been listening in on certain interviews, PM interviews at my current company now, I could see even my manager and my director saying, well, they were talking about RICE or all of these other frameworks. To me, it's like they're still novice. They don't know how it might work launching a product end to end. So it can be bad, or it can be good if you're relatively new in the space, maybe an associate PM, for example. So just be aware of that. Another area, and again, I'm always trying to work on this, but it's a difficult one for me, is show more excitement in your tone, in your dialogue, having a conversation with people, right? Just like how I'm doing this presentation right now, it may, my tone it can be pretty flat. And again, I myself am aware of that. I'm trying to work on that, but how do you pace yourself when you give a presentation, right? Do you take pauses? Do you take breaks, right? Or is it just, go, go, go? And I think for the sake of this conversation, right, there's only 30 minutes. I'm trying to kind of move things along. So it might be rushed, but when you are giving a presentation, make sure you pace yourself and make sure you kind of, if you have the opportunity, look at the audience's kind of facial expressions to make sure they get what you're saying, right? So that's a key thing. And in this case, like I said, unfortunately, there was no offer given for this interview, and they didn't move me to the final onsite. And it took me almost 8 to 10 hours to complete this. So again, try to be mindful of your time. So this is feedback area 1. And then for the second spec, this is the mobile payment spec. This was the prompt. So I already kind of shared this, right? They want an overview, a user flow, user story about the payments themselves, and a few bullets on the rollout. So this is what I decided to do. I focused on a high level objective, what the company's about, their goals, the vision, and then the different goals that I want to track as a PM. So again, very succinct and pretty clear on what the time frame is, what the success looks like, and what I'm trying to do, right? And then I specifically go down each feature. So I want to focus only on mobile payments. Here's a sample persona. Here are the 2 features, dependencies, and then I drill down into the 2 features. One being the internal routing tool, and here's more of the user stories, acceptance criteria, and then the next about the payment experience and ratings. Again, very clear, succinct, and it was easy for them to read and digest. So what happened in this case is that I moved forward to the next round because it was a quick and easy deliverable on my part. The key thing that was missing was more go-to-market. So I must have missed that when I was putting this deck together. Another thing that could have been helpful is kind of share some risks, given that this is a real-time product, kind of share what that looks like. And again, how would you prioritize these 2 features, right? I should have given a better answer as to, well, I want this feature first because it's dependent on this later in the roadmap. So kind of share some of those insights in your deck if you can, and it'll just make it more cohesive. And then referral system, right? So this company, Hippo Insurance, it was a Palo Alto company. They were looking for a PM to help grow more revenue through referrals. And so really building out a new referral program, they wanted essentially a better engine to deliver that. So I kind of explained why they needed one, what were the goals that I was trying to test as a PM, right? Some key assumptions that I had in the insurance industry. So I didn't have too much knowledge in the space. I had to kind of learn some of those concepts and then kind of share my key assumptions here. And they were actually able to help me during the presentation. Well, this is correct, this isn't correct. And again, it would have been good if I knew that ahead of time and I prepared for that, but sometimes you might miss these things, right? You might not know all the information. But what they really liked is kind of driving these different programs for the referrer or the referee. And I made this really easy so that the UX within the room, they understood what the flow was to discover, learn, and send out those invites. They also really liked the referee flow as well, how they would come into the product. So these type of flows made it really clear for the audience to understand my thinking, right? And then kind of explaining in a very high level, what's the user story, what features are needed. And then being able to run this program or this go-to-market motion. So, trying to have high NPS customers sign up for this refer because it's more likely to lead to success. and any other specifics, right? Showing success criteria, some of the risks needed or that could happen, right? So there could be a lot of people gaming the refer system. So how could you safeguard that, potentially in engineering or in the code, right? And then I gave an appendix, right? Because I wanted to make sure I could answer questions, around this refer initiative. And it's good that I had an appendix because the chief product officer asked me, well, can you show me a sample calculation of how much we can potentially generate? And what I did is I went to the back of my appendix, showed this slide, and it wasn't, again, the correct numbers per se and the correct, let's say, numbers that the team had at the time, but seeing this level of thinking and I thought about it, that's a good sign. And he was happy with me showing this. So just being prepared.
Hey, Nick, I just want to give you the 4-minute warning, okay?
Yep, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So sometimes it's good to have, again, appendix slides and share, other insights that they might have questions on after you present. So for this case, it served me well having this calculation. Other things like market data, what have you researched about your total addressable market for this space, and also competition, if there is any, that's helpful, and showing kind of your sources. So in this case, feedback overall, it was a great structure. The user flows were very good and clear. And it also showed that I kind of understood the industry, even though that's not my main expertise. So I took some time to learn about the insurance space, and then I could, speak on it in a 30-minute talk. So it took me roughly 6 to 8 hours to complete, and then I moved on to a final call with the co-founders of the company. Unfortunately, I didn't make it past that round, but the case study got me to that round, so it definitely was positive. So lastly, given that we have a few minutes left, I just want to focus on a few key takeaways. So one, when you are in these interviews, right, and you have a chance to work on the case study, really focus on the structure. You have a structure and you tell the team, this is my structure for this deliverable. It's easy for them to understand what's going to happen next. So always have that. Always get feedback if you can. After you submit your product case, ask the hiring manager, well, what was the problem here or there, right? You want to continuously learn and adapt. So try to ask feedback, both directly or indirectly if possible. Again, practice, practice, practice. So really that just comes down to, if you haven't done too many of these and you know that you have to do a lot of these in your upcoming interviews, start practicing with some one-off questions yourself and build a case study. And then you'll kind of flex that muscle over time and have a more successful conversation. And again, when I say be on time is if you promise a recruiter, I'm going to deliver X in 2 days, make sure you deliver your thing in 2 days. It just shows good professionalism. Other ways to, I think we've kind of gone through that. So kind of ended off there just because we have a minute left. I want to say thank you to everybody on the call, and thank you again, ProductCamp, for having me here today. If you do need mentorship, right, both in product management or in other areas, feel free to jump into my deck and click on this form. What this is going to do is kind of help you match to a particular mentor, kind of one-to-one matching, and find someone that's going to be targeted to your needs. So if you're a product owner, you need help right now for interviewing, fill out the form and we will actually Product Hire can match someone for you. So fill that out if you want. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share with everyone today. So thank you. And
hey, great stuff, Nick. Yeah, great stuff. And you got some engagement in the chat windows and the Slack chat. And I think everyone agrees that your willingness to be self-aware and share that self-awareness around sort of where you've gone well and where you've made some mistakes along the way. Everyone benefits from that. So thanks so much for the great content. I'm not seeing any open questions. I think you got a lot of votes of support along the way, so you should definitely read those. But hey, you have a minute. If anyone wants to come off mute, ask a question, share an insight, please feel welcome to do that.
And I think Johnny, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like you have a question or a hands up.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nicholas. This is a really great presentation. I'm curious, as someone who comes from a non-technical background, you had a slide that talked about a piece of feedback you received where the go-to-market strategy wasn't clear. And I was curious, how technical would go-to-market strategy have to be successful in these case interviews?
So how successful? So
how technical?
How technical? So I don't think it necessarily needs to be technical as in I need to, involve my engineers to build out this system or this webhook or this service in order to get it out the door. When I kind of mention go to market, it means who in my organization is going to help me deliver this product to market. And I'll give you an example with a product that I'm working on now at D&B. So at D&B, one of the products that I'm working on is a SaaS-based solution to help de-anonymize web traffic that comes on someone's site. So, I have my website, ProductHire.com. I install a pixel on my site, and now I can actually start seeing who is actually visiting my website. I see Google, Facebook, and all these other companies visiting my site. Okay? So the go-to-market here, right, for me is, well, do I have the right landing page set up? So that way they can purchase the product, right? Did I talk with the right product marketing team members? Did I talk with the right sales team? So that way they can get comped when a new sale comes in, right? Salespeople, they get a base salary, they also get compensation. Did I talk with that team to figure out go to market? Then engineering, right? Did we do all of our end-to-end testing before we go live, right? Do we have that in our roadmap, in our sprint for the next 2 weeks before we take this live? Those type of things, right? Or even support, for example, right? Do we have a support team ready to answer questions when this goes live? And I need to talk with those members. So it's really uniting all the different orgs or streams and making sure, hey, we're going to make this product successful.